7:02. 7:02, let's do a roll call.
Present Katie Dugan.
Present Chris Peisch.
Francine
here. Francine Lyons here.
Corey,
Corey Evans here.
Susan Franklin here. Okay. Let's see. Looks like we're gonna go right into the meeting with DPW. So are they available, Michelle?
Joyce is coming in now.
Good evening, all.
Good
Brian.
evening.
Brian? How are you?
Well, how are all you doing?
We actually sent out the snowplows.
Yeah. I'm saying we've been super fortunate. We had like a mini storm a couple weeks ago as a practice run, and then we had this one on a Sunday. So, and it was less than forecasted. So yeah, we've been
Right.
I texted my plow guy like 3 weeks ago when we had the storm. I was like, hey, Pat, he's like, yeah, I sold my plow like 18 months ago. I was like, totally get it. Like, I will break out my shovel. Thank you.
Right.
That's the story of the world. I mean, we're down 5 contractors as of the past 2 or 3 years. We haven't had a storm really in 3 years.
I mean, how can you like own that kind of equipment? Like, I'm sure it was like $6,000. He's like, yeah, I'll take that. Thank you.
Right.
So.
So that's why we closed the RTF on Sunday, so we can get all hands on deck.
Yeah.
At any rate, I have I don't know how you want to do. I have a little PowerPoint just on the things where DPW requests. I don't know if you do that or just kind of you have your own format.
I say the PowerPoint would be great. I mean, I had uploaded everything that you had given us in January plus the quotes from today. So the committee has that, but if you want to sort of hit us with a high level summary, that'd be great.
Right. Let's see if I can do this. All right. So I had facilities on here. Well, I know we're not talking about facilities tonight, but
Yeah.
if there are any questions after, I can probably field them. We'll do another night with Nick.
Yeah.
So the DPW requests this year are 2 trucks, an F600 and an F350. The service lift, which is in the garage. We have a small loader backhoe, which is basically our frontline grave digger in the cemeteries. It's also used for normal landscaping operations. And I figure we talk about the roads and sidewalks. I know that you had some questions on the school sidewalk. And then I forgot the bullet here for RTF. We have kind of high level RTF upgrades request out there. We're still fleshing out.
Okay.
So the first one, the F60, that shouldn't be F's chip body. Sorry, I think I took this from last year's slide, but we had a chip body last year. This year's a F600 dump body. We're looking to replace a 2012 F550 diesel. That it's pretty well corroded. You can see the pictures of the body there. Those side panels in the lower right, actually the guys, when the lockers were replaced at the police station, DPW took the old police lockers and they cut up our lockers and we replaced the sides of the truck with the old lockers just so we could get it to pass inspection. So they cut them and put them on the side of the dump body and then painted them, and we're good for another year. But at any rate, it just demonstrates that we're at end of life with the corrosion on the body and on the frame of this vehicle. So we're going as we have been in recent years because of all the issues with diesels and the DEF, the exhaust system problems. With those, where we can, we're going from diesel to gas. So the F600 was going to be a gas. It's a plow with a sander. It's a main vehicle during storm cleanups, tows a chipper, and materials. Do you want me to keep going through these, or do you guys want to ask questions as we go?
Keep cranking through.
Well, I guess I did have a question just about the pricing on this one.
Yes. So we
Um,
had the request in for 175. That was conservative based on kind of last year's estimates. The one that we just received today, unfortunately, there's flu has been going around, especially at our dealer. So several of the vendors we've been working out are out, and they have been the past couple of weeks. So I got a quote from a gentleman today that I passed along this afternoon. It was less. I don't know if I can switch screens here, but it was less than the 175. I want to say it was 153.
Yeah, we can see that, Ryan, 153, 385.
Yeah. So 153 and change. The only thing, because we just got it this afternoon, we haven't had a chance to look at the line by line. The only thing I didn't notice in there, so because of what we're looking at on this vehicle with all the corrosion and rot, we have been going to stainless steel bodies, which is a little more money, but it pays itself in the long run. We don't have to get rid of vehicles because of corrosion. So if that stainless steel is in there, I think we're good with that quote. If it's not, then I think it may be a little bit more than that 153. So I don't want to change the request for the 175 right now until we kind of vet that. And
Okay.
that'll just be a couple of days.
Okay.
It's not jumping out at me, so maybe it's not in there. I don't see it. Oh, wait, no, that's the spreader. I don't see.
Yeah. I did the same thing the last time. I'm kind of like going line by line. The only stainless steel I saw was on the spreader, which is, you can see in the picture. We have all stainless.
Yeah. Okay.
If we buy stainless bodies, conceivably we can then transfer them to new trucks, or even if stainless at that point, do we have enough beat up where they're really not useful after 15 years?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
I'm saying if we go stainless steel for the add-on, the dump body portion, is that something that we plan to transfer to new chassis as time goes on, or are they pretty much beat up after 15 years and we really can't harvest them anymore?
Well, I think if we we don't have the history with that, but if we go with a dump body, I guess theoretically you wouldn't have that corrosion and the salt that you can see in the picture here leaking down into the frame. The frame is not going to be stainless steel, so it's subject to corrosion, but we do wash everything after we hose it down, even the underbelly. So hopefully we'd get more life out of it. I can't say 15 years. That's a pretty good life.
Okay.
So it's not, so you're saying that the body will last longer. Does that mean that the vehicle will have a longer life overall?
So
Or-
you can see, you can see the body there on this one. You can see the pitted and holes
Yeah.
where the salt goes through. So with stainless steel, you wouldn't have that. All of the sand just get washed out with a hydrant hose at the end of each, kind of
I'm
operation.
just trying to
So
understand if we would have a longer useful life for the vehicle overall by having the stainless steel body.
I think it would. We don't have a stainless steel body that's been on for that duration, but theoretically, we wouldn't have the corrosion below, from the salt above. It would just be kind of road salts that we could wash off underneath.
Yeah. And the dump body, the F550 that we're replacing has 14 years of service on it currently.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right,
Sorry.
so-
Oh, sorry. I had one quick question. Just to clarify, maybe you said this in the beginning, Brian, was, oh, yep, sorry. I see it right there, chip body. I was looking at the list. There's
Yeah,
a chip body.
I messed up. If you look underneath, it's actually a dump body. So
Oh, okay.
we'll talk about the chip body you all give us money to buy the chip body, which should be
Mhm.
coming in shortly.
Mhm.
That kind of dovetails into our next vehicle. So this is the 350 utility body that we're looking to replace. It's a 2007 F350 diesel. It's had a history of being out of commission, and currently, just in the past week, it won't start, and it's gone back to the dealer, and we have a price tag of $3,000 just to diagnose the problem. So in about 2 months ago, we had another $3,000 bill on this. So we don't want to keep sinking money into this vehicle. What we'd like to do, and just going back to this one, last year you bought us a chip body, which should be coming in shortly. What we'd like to do is not spend the $3,000 on not trade in the old chip body for the new chip body, but trade in this defunct vehicle that's not working right now instead of spending $3,000. Keep that chip body until we replace this 350 and then trade it in with that. So it's basically just kind of a shell game on the trade-ins.
Gotcha.
Say trade it in, are you saying just, are you using that to mean replace it, or you actually think there's somebody would take this on a trade-in?
Just get some whatever trade-in value they give us on it.
Yeah, the tires actually don't look terrible.
Yeah, I mean, the guys do keep up with maintenance on it. It's just, when you get down to the frame and the corrosion, I don't think anybody will like the taped seat.
Okay.
So the 350 is it's our utility body. Again, we're going gas driven, not diesel. It holds our tools. It's got a tow and plow package. For any of the projects out in the site, it's got the inverter, and the guys use power tools to do grinding and lifting. The new quote that you received today does have a crane arm, and the reason for the difference between the request amount and the quote we see today is that crane arm. So we would like to keep that in there if we can. If not, we could reduce it by that value. I think it's around 27, or I think around 29,000 installed. And again, that would just, that's a safety issue, and it would help them, lift things and catch basins and side of the road.
Okay, so there is the optionality for 29,000 less for 107,000.
Right, and again, that quote, that line quote that we received today, we're going to go through that. So if there's any change, we'll be in talk about that.
Gotcha. Yeah. It looks like it's 30,000 for the crane.
When we have those types of things, Brian, like a crane, would we remove that from a vehicle and reuse it when that vehicle? Like, we have one now, do we not? I think I remember lifting something for lawnmowers, I think came up that could be lifted by a crane.
Yeah, so I mean, we have usually for anything heavy, we use our forklift, but this would be, it'd be easier to lift things into the back of the vehicle. Small motors and things that need to get transferred, catch basin frames and grates, things like that. We don't have one on a tow truck, on a pickup truck right now.
Mm-hmm. But the useful life of a crane, is it longer than the life of the truck? That's what my question is.
I think, all those items are could be unbolted and taken off the unit. It's just hydraulic.
So if we have 10 to 12 years on a F350 utility body, the crane, because it's not obviously direct to corrosion, could outlive that and be attached to a new one, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is a 2007, so this is 19 years of service.
Yeah, and it just doesn't make any sense to throw more money at it.
Okay. And the trade-in of the F-350 that's currently broken, you would trade that in?
We would trade that in. I don't have the value on it right now, but
Gotcha.
the idea was that the 600 that was coming in and the vehicle it was replacing, which was the old chip body, getting traded in. But that one it's running, knock wood.
Yeah,
It's got a plow on it, and this other vehicle doesn't start, so we just swapped them out.
and that's just sort of a temporary thing until you're able to get both vehicles in. And then,
Correct.
yeah. Okay.
And we didn't ask that question on the other vehicle, trade-in on that as well? Not reflected?
Yeah,
And
let
then
me get the trade in on both of those.
Okay.
Susan or Francine or Ralph, how does the trade-in value work? Do we normally fund the net amount, or how does that work? Or does the trade-in value go elsewhere in the town budget?
Normally, it just gets deducted from the invoice for
Right.
the,
Okay,
Usually, yeah, we go for the value of what we ever quote, and then it gets deducted on the invoice, and whatever is not used for the purchase goes back into the capital budget at the end of the cycle.
gotcha. So we sort of pick it up the following year in terms of the repurposed articles, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay. So that's the F-350. I don't know if I had any other questions. And I don't know if the rest of people saw it, but Brian did provide us with the full rolling stock. And that was like not in a folder. It was sort of sitting in the DPW folder at the higher level up. So if people wanted to see the full rolling stock, it was there.
That was really helpful. I did see that. And I do actually have a question then going back to the dump truck on that. The two Dodge 5500s that are newer, what's the difference between those dump trucks then and the Ford 550 dump truck?
You're looking
In
at the
terms of
rolling
use-
stock list?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. In terms of usage.
doing the same thing.
So are you looking at what I'm looking at right now, the rolling stock?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at my own separate screen.
I mean, when I transition screens, are you still looking at the PowerPoint, or are
We're
you
still
looking?
looking at the
Oh,
PowerPoint.
sure, yeah, sorry.
Okay, all right, so you're looking at the Dodge, the 550.
Yes, the Dodge 550, yes.
Yeah, so we have the 5500, it's similar size in the Ford F550s. We've got the 11 truck, 12 truck, and 13 truck. They're all they're tree and park and highway vehicles. You know, for towing, basically towing, dumping, and bringing mowers around town. So each basically staff member is driving one of these around with equipment. So I don't know if that was your question, or are they similar services?
Yes, that's what I'm curious about, because like I say, this list is really, really helpful to look at. And I don't know, the two Dodge 5500s, as you pointed out, which look newer, according to the year column,
Yeah.
versus the Ford 550, which is the one you're trying to replace, which is quite old, as you pointed out. I'm not sure I appreciate what those are used for. It sounds like all three are used for similar functions. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah. So we have a 2018, a 2021 5500 Dodge, and we have two F550s that were 2012 vintage.
And I guess the only other question I had then was, is there an advantage to and I don't know if they're similar size trucks too. Sounds like we use them for the same purpose, but if they're the similar size and horsepower, going from the Ford to the Dodge and having all the same manufacturer, does it help to have one brand, so to speak, or?
Yeah, no, it's a
doesn't
good
really matter?
question. We have tried to, standardize with I mean, in recent years, it's been the Ford's F550s, and we had, you are able to take parts off of one vehicle if it's not working and put on another vehicle potentially. But the F600 was chosen by Carl and Dan basically as the unit that they like over the Dodge. And
Okay.
to be honest, they are the gearheads in here. I don't I don't know the preference of the Dodge, and I'm assuming this is, they use the lift that we'll be talking about in a minute to go underneath and work on different parts. And I think it may have to do something with maintenance.
Okay.
Thank you.
But
To
on,
answer your original question, they are all the same service function. They're out plowing and sanding and moving material.
yeah. And on that list, it was Unit 7, Unit 10, and Unit 21 that we were talking about replacing this cycle. The F350, the F550, and the backhoe loader. Those were the three that were up for replacement.
That is correct.
Yep.
And just I'll just say now the backhoe loader would be the lowest priority. I know we usually talk about that at the end, but it's just it's a 2000, and we'll talk about it in a minute. It's getting old.
Okay.
So I'm just going to toggle back to my. So did the slideshow stop for you guys?
No?
Oh, still.
It went back to the first slide for it's
Okay.
up, but it went back to the first slide.
So the service, are you looking at the service lift page? I don't know why I won't go to slideshow function, but it's I'm just going
Yep, we see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the service lift we talked about last year, it's over 25 years old. The parts are getting harder to find, and it does work functionally right now, but we were looking to change it so that we could have another 25 years or so, a safety piece of equipment. You guys use it for brakes, oil changes, really anything that's you need to work on under the truck. And they also use it for lifting up containers, doing welding repairs on the RTF containers, and anything else that's heavy. This is the piece of equipment that's used.
And it didn't seem like there was a quote yet for this particular piece of equipment, in terms of the 58,000, or maybe I was missing it. I didn't see it in the detail when I went back through.
All right, let me get that. I think it was the quote from last year.
Okay.
And just one note on the installation of a new unit. So the connection between these two, the left and the right-hand side of this lift, are hydraulic lines that go underneath the concrete floor. So the concrete floor would need to be, that trough would need to be chipped out, and the new unit would, there'd be some concrete repair work, and the new unit would be bolted to the floor, and all the hydraulics would be overhead at a height above, the lifting capacity that you would need to go to, or the lifting height, I should say.
So, the
Okay.
lift was deferred from last year, 58,000 is the quote from last year, so if you don't mind sending along the detail, I would love to see it, and I can upload it to the OneDrive for everyone. Does the 58,000 include the installation that you were just referring to, or is that separate?
Yeah, that includes about $10,000 of the installation. I think it was 48,000 and $10,000
Okay.
for the concrete work and then, the installation work.
So Brian, how much do you think the quote's gonna move, obviously, right? Upward?
I think we built in that 58,000. So I think we're pretty good at the 58,000, and
Okay.
once I get off this, so when we talk about those other two vehicle quotes, tomorrow and the next day, I'll review the service lift quote with the guys as well, and we'll pass that all along.
Okay. And when we had met with you liaisons back in January, it sounded like the service lift was your number one priority, just because it had been deferred and it was sort of a critical piece of machinery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just they're all critical pieces, but this is a safety thing. So I think it puts it above the vehicles, even though we can't plow if there's no vehicle to plow with. But.
Right. There's secondary safety issues there.
Yeah, right, I guess.
Okay. So service lift number one, I think you had said number two was both the vehicles, and number four was as you already said, the backhoe.
Right. And that's this unit here. So again, it looks good. The guys take care of it. It stays inside, but this is our frontline piece of equipment for digging graves. And just to put in perspective, in the past 2 weeks, well, within a week and a half, we had eight burials. So it's something, when you need it, you can't do without it. And the alternative is a backhoe, which you can't really operate in the tight quarters around headstones and such, or hand digging.
Old school.
Yeah.
Old school in January.
Brian, there's no other use for this type of a unit elsewhere in the town?
Oh, so it is used as tree and park for landscaping. They can tow a mower behind it. They use it for, excavating or material moving, or kind of anything they do. Like they rehab the Cedar Street Cemetery and Greengate in the past year, and this machine was up there doing, some lifting.
When we had a meeting with Nick on the facilities front, he had also mentioned that this particular unit was also used for Deer Hill and Osgood and all the playgrounds, when they're sort of, again, doing that kind of moving mulch and doing that kind of work. This is the piece of equipment they use for that.
Yeah, so it's and it's, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's a perfect example. There was 100 cubic yards of material. You're not going to hand shovel and use a wheelbarrow for that. And a Bobcat just tears things up the way it articulates and the wheels move. So this unit doesn't really rip things up, and you can spread wood chips in the playgrounds, and it's small enough that you can operate around the equipment there. And that's an annual maintenance thing that Nick does.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of problems with this? Like have you had to put a lot of money into it with it breaking down or anything?
No, I mean, it's a simple unit. It's just in talking with the operators, it's getting old, and when you get an older piece of hydraulic unit, you can tell when you can't lift it what it used to lift, and it doesn't have the kind of the earth excavating power that it does And as you know, Cohasset soils are pretty bony, so there's a lot of rocks up there.
Never heard the term bony, but I like that. Like, I think my husband has another word for it when he's got.
So the other one was from 2000, so it's lasted, what, 24 years?
Yeah, this one we're looking at the pictures of is 2000.
Mhm.
And so this unit is a John Deere 420. They don't sell that particular model anymore, but there are models similar to that size. I think it's called a 4200, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and we don't have a quote on this one yet either?
No,
Okay. So where does this one, where does this one land on your prioritization of the vehicle part of it?
It's more of a heads up, and you know, we know you have limited funds, but we're coming back with this, I think next year. I mean, we will get a quote for this year. The unit is functioning, unlike, you know, some of the other items we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, does it make 25 years to 26? Like, I mean, I think you've got like the paint job looks a little too shiny for like 25 years.
I say the guys do a great job maintaining it, and you know, stuff that's, I want to say, you know, early 2000s and older are easier to work on than the computerized newer systems.
Yeah.
And the guys up there are great mechanics. You know, they get into everything.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, well, the next couple of slides I had was basically just kind of roads and just general RTF. So I don't know in what order, or if you guys want to talk about this.
I
Again,
would say roads next, because that's concrete. The RTF is a little bigger.
Was that a
Yeah.
pun?
Yeah, exactly.
Bituminous asphalt.
Exactly. Sorry, I didn't even know I'm making puns. I'm like, it's been that kind of
We should
day.
start with sidewalks first, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is kind of, I mean, it's all our tax money, but it's not coming out of the capital budget fund. It's just year
Yep.
over year, it's the biggest capital expense the town spends. So it's worthy of review. So what's planned for this year, and we've been coordinating with the roads and sidewalk committee and our contractors. So we have Pond Street from Route 3A to King Street, and that includes a new sidewalk. We have the sidewalk designed, and it's going to go to Concom for permitting in the next month. And hopefully we'll have everything permitted and ready to go for construction season and hit that in the springtime. And then we have Beechwood Street from South Main Street to Route 3A. So that would kind of pick up on the new South Main Street pavement and then go down to where Mass DOT is now starting to do the Route 3A project. And their project it's going to be a 3-year project. It's just starting this month, and we had the pre-construction meeting last week. It includes a lot of utility work prior to them doing the road work, but that will tie in Beechwood Street. There'll be a new lighted intersection there, and they're going up a few hundred or so feet on the town road. So we'll tie into that, whatever that joint comes into.
And the 3A stuff you're referring to is like the bigger project that started back in 2013. It's finally starting. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the tip process. It's
Yep.
like it's a decade long. But there is another DOT project on Route 3A that was, I'll call it like a quick hitter. They're doing a sidewalk, and it's under their maintenance group, not really their design tip group, where they're installing a sidewalk from Pond Street to Sawyer Street on the east side. So basically the side by Stop and Shop, it's going to go in front of Stop and Shop and all down that edge of Route 3A and connect to Pond Street. So that sidewalk system will tie into the sidewalks that we're putting on Pond Street, going to King Street there. So hopefully, at some point in the future, we'll get King Street, we'll get Pond Street, and you'll be able to walk from Beechwood Playground all the way to the schools and stop and shop on a sidewalk.
Okay. And that quick hit program that you were referring to, that begins roughly when, do we know?
So it's starting in the spring as well. And I forget the program that DOT has, but basically instead of 10 years, they planned it, in a year, and it includes us, and it includes, I think, 10 other communities, including Duxbury, New Bedford, Fall River, and it's just installing sidewalks and repairing sidewalks on DOT roadways. And fortunately, they're starting with Cohasset and moving their way southward. So that's supposed to start in the spring as well.
All right, so it's not called quick hit. That's just what.
No, it's just that's my term.
Exactly. Sorry.
But it's, compared to the TIP program, it's great because they thought of the idea, they funded it, and they're coming in and doing it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure it has some great name like Allies in Action or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, so the 2 3A ones are state funded, but they'll tie into what we're doing on the town side on Beechwood and Pond.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other two roads we have are Bancroft. So Bancroft's in pretty rough shape. That goes from Pond Street over to where the new tennis courts are, or are being finished. And then Short Street. So right now, our contractor is doing the Cedar Street water main loop through the DPW yard, and they should be done, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then once the weather breaks, they'll be going to Short Street to install that water main. And then, after 90 days of settlement, we'll pave that hopefully in the fall.
Okay.
So that, in a nutshell, is this year's road fund. And this is all funded with the new road fund that was created 2 town meetings ago.
So that's the.
What about Chapter 90 monies? Are there Chapter 90 monies?
Yep. So this includes all the Chapter 90 money and the entirety of the budget of the new road fund.
Yeah, it's how we get to 1.3, right?
Yeah,
Right.
because the roads are 800,000 plus Chapter 90, roughly 500 gets you to the 1.3.
And so this, and sorry, Corey, your face is in the way of the total like on my screen. No, so these estimates here are using DOT pricing, not our MAPC consortium paving pricing. So we're going to get a better price than these on it. But we're still working with the TL Edwards on getting these quotes in the next month or so. But we're not going to be at 1.3. We'll probably be closer to $1 million.
Okay. What is our Chapter 90 coming in at now? I mean, I have a figure of like 550 stuck in my head, but is that high?
No, it's historically, I mean, I'm saying historically, like the past decade, it's been anywhere like 210,000, but they've added just this year, we're promised more money from the, what they call it, the millionaires tax, I think. So it may be, what I've heard is another 100,000. So it probably might be 300 to 320. And, and we have been fortunate to get some, and I don't know the funding mechanism from the state, but sometimes they come out with winter rapid recovery money that we've used, at the end of, maybe they have free cash at the end of the year and they put it to the communities for winter recovery.
Okay. So anywhere between the 800,000 that we're funding into the road stabilization fund plus 250 to low 300s from chapter 90 is sort of our budget.
Yeah,
So about $500,000.
that's fair.
Okay. All right. And I think you mentioned when we met that the current roads and sidewalks committee, quote unquote, voted on this proposal back in December. So this is their recommendation to the town in terms of the plan for fiscal 26.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And I think the question, it still is sort of like the question that's sitting out there is the schools have put in a series of requests for roads and sidewalks. It obviously doesn't fit into the FY26 plan because it's already been developed and is sitting in front of us. But the question becomes like, going forward, is there appetite to fit it in there, or does it belong elsewhere in the school stabilization or back to the capital stabilization? I think that's the question as to how we fit in schools on top of what's already being planned for the town overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question. So, and just to put it in perspective, we got a quote to pave the Deer Hill and Osgood campus in sidewalks and such last year, and it was on around $1 million. So the choice is, you know, do we not pave any roads in an entire year, or and just focus on a school campus, or you know, and I would say we need to keep up our road plan and keep replacing our roads. So it's really that trade-off, you know, paving roads versus a school campus. So there's no funding right now. I guess the funding would be in the schools fund, their new fund, but they're also focused on roofs and
There's no funding there either. Right.
yes, some other school items.
Okay.
And the one that we have been talking about just recently was a small project. It was just connection of a sidewalk from, you know, the sidewalk ends coming, if you're walking from Alumni Stadium down to Pond Street, it just ends and is about 170 feet missing. And I think it was probably because of permitting that they didn't do it, because there's some wetlands there. So I'm starting that permitting discussion just to see what the wetlands, what the permitting requirements might be. But if it's a straight sidewalk with, you know, just a straight cross section of a sidewalk, we could probably do it for about $50,000. That provided we don't need to do, you know, a lot of extraneous water quality stuff.
Okay. So sort of the concrete portion of it is 50,000. The wild card is the permitting. Do you need to do pervious? Do you need to put in Coltech chambers and do all the remediation for stormwater because when I looked at what you had sent through, it looked like it was in the 50-foot buffer zone, which
It is. Yeah.
adds to the escalation in terms of like the remediation sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. And for that matter, the entire entrance of the roadway is
I noticed
within
that.
the 50-foot buffer zone.
Right.
But, you know, I will say that 50-foot buffer zone is a man-made culvert and a drainage ditch that takes the drainage from Alumni. So it's been shaped in the past. So maybe we can do a sidewalk and maybe do some sort of BMP and maybe either a rain garden or a deep sump that cleans up the, you know, the suspended solids before it discharges. I would rather do that than pervious pavement. So a few years back, we did the Sawyer Street sidewalk. It just, the cost of that was astronomical. The pavement for pervious pavement was, at that time, was about $240 a ton, compared to about $90 a ton for regular asphalt. And that was in addition to, you know, the entire substrate, you know, 2 feet of filter fabric and soils and collection pipes. So I would rather have a runoff catchment that cleaned it up than do an entire pervious sidewalk.
Even if it's 170 feet.
Yeah, it's just there's better ways to spend money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the things that has been pushed off again and again and again. And that Concom report seemed like, yeah, you're within that buffer, but there's no other kind of big red flags. So it'd be just nice if this was $50,000, we'd get it out of the way versus it just, there's so many projects. I mean, we've all been there. I mean, Ralph, the longest, of just stuff that never gets done because there's just some sort of weird hiccup and it's just so frustrating. So I know that this is one thing which I hope we can get through. And then to the point of the other things, the other projects, the schools did have requests for patching and stuff like that, but the broader conversation about figure out how to pay for a proper fix is kind of one that the schools are willing to have, and I think the select board and ourselves and everybody, we have to get our heads together and figure out, knowing that there's not enough money for anything, which is the case across the board, how do we efficiently get things done.
Well, and how do we begin to fit them in as, again, if we could chunk off a $50,000 sidewalk, maybe it's, 75,000 with permitting and some additional bells and whistles for the Concom piece of it, that would be a win. And then you start making room going forward for other pieces of it. It's just phasing it is the only way we're ever going to tackle any of this.
Does the 50 include, let's say, just kind of level 1 permitting, or is that just for the construction, Brian?
So the permitting that I'm initiating now is just an RDA. I'm paying for that out of my operating budget engineering line.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's short money relatively, but if we need to do other, like a much bigger design and permitting, we'd probably have to put it into that budget.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the 50,000 doesn't really contemplate much of anything in terms of Concom remediation, correct?
Right. It's just straight up construction.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
It's
Great
straight
grading,
up. Yep.
grading, subgrade, pave it, and some curbing.
Yeah, I mean, it is always surprising to me that 170 feet of sidewalk can cost 50,000, but there you go. So.
Yeah, it's sidewalks cost double basically what roads cost just because of it's handwork and it's usually in tight quarters. This is fortunately most of it's kind of in the open, but
yeah. Yep. Okay, so we'll hear Concom will give a first read on the Pond Street to Alumni Stadium tomorrow night, and we'll know more coming out of that.
yeah, actually, I think it's so the submission. I think the meeting is in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But all the materials need to be submitted tomorrow. So.
Oh, I gotcha. So the actual would be on the 25th.
Right, and they're whatever that Thursday is. They meet on Thursday nights.
On Thursdays. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's the 27th. Yeah. Okay.
And then 2 weeks later than that, I will probably have the Pond Street sidewalk permitting in there.
Okay.
And that's also in the 50-foot buffer. It goes along Peppermint Brook and that kind of marshy area that's adjacent to Pond Street.
Okay.
So Brian, after we implement on this list, how many miles of our, what was it, 47 miles of roads will we have accomplished under this plan I think it's been 3 years now that we've been doing it this way?
So we're in our second year of using the new fund.
Using the fund, but we started, you had a plan for all 47 miles.
The 20-year plan. That's a good question. I'll have to come back to you with that answer. But yeah, we've had the 20-year plan, probably 5 years, averaging 1.5 to 2 miles a year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're probably at, a quarter of the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just trying to figure out when we might see some light to do other things than the actual roads, and maybe contemplate school
Well,
parking lots and things like that.
Yeah, I think, so there's a few, I want to say probably 15% of our roads need major rehabilitation where you have to do the sub base. But hopefully if we get into that cycle where we get all of our roads reconstructed, then you're just into a mill and overlay and it becomes a lot cheaper. You're not doing a full road reconstruction. So, I'd say our road, and this is forgetting about the asphalt prices going up and down and fuel and all that stuff. But I think in 10 years from now, we should be in that mill and overlay. 7 to 10 years, we'll be in the mill and overlay business instead of like road reconstruction business where we're doing, full sub base, leveling course and then top.
So we're still sort of on in a triage, we're still sort of in the critical triage phase. We haven't sort of made it to the second phase of it yet in terms of the overall plan.
Yes, I'd say that. I mean, we are doing mill and overlay on some roads. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at like Bancroft, for instance, that needs a lot of work. And Norfolk Road will need a lot of work when that happens, along with all the other hillside streets going down towards Cushing.
Mhm. Okay. So it sounds like to your point, we're still a good way off, if I'm understanding you correctly, from being able to contemplate more than just the basics of the 20-year plan.
Right. Yeah, I think we still have some more major road reconstruction, but when we do get to the point where, and maybe we want to do a trial, we've been looking at this micro surfacing is it's a product where instead of doing a mill and overlay, you do a crack resealing and you do this very thin micro surface. Hingham has done it on a few roads with some positive results. So maybe, we might do a trial on that on a road that's newer, just to get more longevity than the 20 years on it. At least that's the theory. So we'll be looking at other options, but I think we need a few more roads majorly reconstructed, and then we'll be in kind of a better shape. And sorry, I don't have the numbers here in front of you. I get to like toggle between screens.
Yeah.
So any more paving questions, or do you want to?
I don't have any more. Anyone else?
I'm good on paving.
And thanks, Katie, for that, the master plan, that letter of support for the sidewalks.
Yeah, that was what we did for Sawyer to support Jason at the time when he was trying to go before Concom, to try and at least show that there were other committees that were supportive. So hopefully there'll be some tidbits. And I'm sure the schools will be able to talk about this number of students that as we talk about connectivity down Pond and some of the other pieces in terms of creating walkability. I'm sure they can give enrollment numbers down those streets that might add some power to that conversation too.
So the last one was basically there's a line, and I don't know if Michelle had anything to add, but basically we're just still doing upgrades at the RTF. I don't know if any of you were up there this weekend, but we're working on automation, and we've got we have two compactors that are self-loading, both the cardboard and now the plastics. And next we'll be working on kind of the glass building, but ultimately we're hoping to get the glass and the tin with covered units where people are disposing of their own materials without having to be handled by staff. We're looking at sidewalks and railings. We're getting some quotes for a new sidewalk in front of the, where the household trash is disposed of for safety reasons. There's those curbing stops there that aren't ideal. And we're also looking at railing systems that are in code.
The bumpers for cars, actually, I always worry I'm gonna trip on it and actually fall over into the. I know why they're there, because you don't want a car going in, but I'm always afraid I'm gonna go in.
Yes, suboptimal, definitely.
Yeah.
And Michelle and I have met with several residents. There's a group of residents that formed a committee called Friends of the Boutique, and we've been kind of brainstorming with that group on what a new boutique might look like, including for maybe staffing or volunteers, or how that would run. And the Boy Scouts and other nonprofits like the Boosters is there's a lot of we've been hearing that a lot of these nonprofits are losing money because of the inability to use the RTF as kind of a fundraising area.
Yep.
Michelle, are you on? Did you have anything to add?
Michelle dropped. She's sick.
Yeah, I know. She
Didn't sound good.
sounded great. So anyway, this is kind of a placeholder. I had 120,000 in it. That was for kind of the sidewalk and railings. But there's other buildings and structures and items that Michelle wanted to add in there. So I guess right now it's kind of just a placeholder still without a definitive value on the request. Hopefully we'll nail it down, as we get closer to town meeting with some time to talk about it.
It also sounded like the conversation about enterprise fund related to the RTF was sort of kicked off by the select board, or kicked off by Chris Senior this past week. And so that also sort of factors into what does the next evolution look like, if it's going to be an enterprise fund for just those that choose to access the RTF going forward. And if we move to you pay more for accessing the facility, what does that do in terms of overall demand amongst the town? So.
Right. Yep. So we're getting all those figures together. We're looking at our hauling, and just kind of nailing down how much we haul, how much we pay for. I think the challenge with the enterprise fund, and it's not insurmountable, but is trying to get a value of what the market rate is going to be in the future, because the market for recyclables and all the items we get rid of, it goes up and down and fluctuates pretty significantly over a year. So we need to be conservative enough, but not so much that you chase people away from using it.
Yeah. And I don't know how much it costs to get curbside pickup, but like that's your other not only is it like, how do you price it so that it funds itself, but then how do you compete with the guy that comes down the street and picks it up from your curb?
Right.
So. Okay. Yeah, and I think Michelle had moved the number around from 120,000 to something lower, and so we're sort of this is like the placeholder of all placeholders right now in our budget. Sort of think about how things come together.
Right, and I think that placeholder is obviously it's fungible, but it's going to be a phased approach no matter what happens. It's not going to happen overnight where it turns into enterprise or private or whatever. So we'll need to keep operating as we go, and it'll be like buying units like these self-contained compactors that you see up there now for the plastic. We'd like to get 2 more of those units. They're roughly $40,000 a piece. So again, it'd be kind of a phased approach of buying pieces of equipment so that we can automate. It would help with staffing levels, and it would help with really kind of, we could get rid of some of these buildings that we've put in capital requests for, you know, roofs and things like that.
Yeah. And I guess some of it, I mean, the equipment would be a new add to the RTF, but then it also, in the back of my mind, the other funding source is the insurance money. And I just don't know how before we talk about putting new capital money in, it would be nice to understand sort of what the insurance ledger side also looks like. Obviously, what was destroyed is different from what you're talking about putting in terms of, you know, compactors for glass and tin, but it is a funding stream.
Yes, and I don't know if that's ready for prime time yet, but I think, I know Michelle is buttoning up the claim with the insurance company, and I think probably a subsequent meeting will go over those figures.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I mean, from what I heard tonight, it was really, at least on the first 4 requests for the DPW, it was really buttoning up pricing. So making sure that you're comfortable with the quotes that came in for the F600, F350, and then getting us a quote for the service lift, if it's the refreshing the one from last year, and then getting us an actual quote for the John Deere backhoe loader.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else had anything else that they had marked in their follow-up.
No, pretty
So
straightforward.
I had those same action items listed here in my notes, so
Okay.
we'll get those to you as soon as we can. And well, I'll talk with you offline. I'm having trouble with the OneDrive. I suppose I could, I'll email them and I'll upload them as well. But
Yeah, or you can email them to me. I'm happy to upload them, Brian, and sort of do that administrative piece for you. So that's fine. You know, we've from a timeline, like we've got town hall coming up on the 24th, and then right now we don't have anything. I mean, we'll have to schedule a March meeting, so we'll sort of figure out what our March follow-up cycle looks like. But DPW was sort of the last department we were hearing from. And now it's town hall and sort of doing the master puzzle.
And the enterprise funds will be out there.
Oh, the
too.
enterprise funds, you're right, sorry, water and sewer.
Mhm.
So have you received anything on water and sewer yet?
No,
Okay.
Yeah. I think Michelle was going to follow up, because when we talked about it last meeting, it was like, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, so we probably caught them off guard that we're already looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that. So I think water, you know, water, we have the mains going on that are funded right now, the Cedar Street and the Short Street, and then South Main Street as well, which goes to the village. So there's an appropriation out there for water main work that I think they're pretty good. They probably will have an article at town meeting for the DOT project that goes down 3A. They've requested to replace that water main, and it's a non-participating cost where they just pay, you know, the DOT contractor installs it, and the water department just pays for basically the materials. It's a lot cheaper than contracting it yourself. At
That's
any
the
rate,
that's the 3A South, they would piggyback on that.
yes, yeah, that's already a done deal. They've signed the agreement with them, but they need to come up with the funding. Again,
Yep.
it's a 3-year project, so that water main, you pay for it after they install it. That water main's probably going to go in, you know, 12 months from now, thereabouts. On the sewer side, there's an I&I project going on right now, and the membranes were just replaced. I think and again, I'm not speaking for either commission right now. I just, you know, I go to the meetings, but their generator, just had an issue. I don't think they're gonna look to replace it. They're gonna repair it, but it may be on their forecast for, I'll say the 5-year plan. And we've got a grant with the state to do an asset management plan for the entire wastewater treatment plant that's underway right now. So they're going in, inventorying all the equipment with a condition code and kind of a life cycle, you know, a life cycle, and then a cost associated with it, and also I guess I forget what it is, like a hazard class. If it fails, how critical is it? A criticality component of it. Like, will the plant stop working, or can you work without this component?
Yep.
So that should be delivered in probably around town meeting, and that'll be I guess our capital plan going forward for the wastewater treatment plant. So it'll be a lot of things that weren't really looked at before, and so next year I think there'll be a lot more discussion on the sewer side.
Yeah, that will sprout some mushrooms that need to be funded.
Right.
Okay.
But that's the last slide I had.
Okay.
So unless anybody has any other questions,
Well, I think on the first slide you had the library project, which we already heard.
oh
from-
yeah, so
from Nick. Did you want to add something there?
yeah, so and I don't know if you've seen there, but basically it's leaning out or leaning in, so it needs to be reconstructed.
Yeah, he did a pretty thorough job of presenting it.
Great.
And it sounded like that was sort of phase 1 of, 3 or 4 in terms of the masonry players on the envelope of that building.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure he talked about the consultant went out there and looked at the entire facade and gave a kind of a phased approach on each face of the building.
Yep.
Mhm. He showed that, yep.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So I think from us, we'll wait to hear from you on quotes. And then if anything else comes up, it'll probably be March timeframe in terms of circling back.
All right. Well, I'll be at that 1 in 2 weeks when you guys are talking about town hall. So.
Oh, that's right. You get you get to come to that.
Be
Town hall, is it 5.0, 6.0? I don't know at this point.
gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly.
It'd be sad when we stop talking about that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. It was helpful to do the pre-meeting, and hopefully we'll continue that next year, at least to get the ball rolling.
All right, great. All right, thanks everyone. Good night.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I looked up this micro surfacing. It's kind of interesting. Remember when they used to seal roads with like just that liquid sealer? It's kind of like an emulsion now. That's part asphalt, part liquid sealer.
So it's like the commercial version of the tar that people put on their driveways. Is that sort of?
I guess, well, it's a little, yeah, it has fresh rock in it and stuff. It says it can extend the life of a road 7 to 9 years, but the road itself can't be in completely horrible condition, like Brian was saying. It has to be something that is, more on the surface and not deep into the road itself.
That's cool.
Interesting.
I find it very funny. Like in Western New York, everybody used to every couple years, everybody go out and tar their driveways. It was like a thing. And around here, I see people doing it, but it's kind of casual. But it was like everybody did their like new tar surface to their driveway.
Yeah, they did that in my town too. It might have been 1970s, 80s kind of thing.
It was one of those smells of summer. It's like,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is review and discussing financial policies.
Yep.
So, let's go back to where we were on that. Katie, which document do you think is the best one for us to be looking at while we're reviewing?
Let's see, so we go into, sorry. OneDrive signed me out. We go into the meeting folder for 210. There were two. There was the town financial management policies, which is the high level one, and then there's also the reserve and debt policies.
Where did those end up?
They're in the OneDrive. If you go to the folder capital budget meetings,
Gotcha. Oh, there you go.
under
Okay. Yep.
210, there's a folder called financial policies. And the first one, the town financial management policies, this was a set of policies that was first drafted in 2012, right after the fiscal crisis that the town had, and it's been updated, as you can see at the top of the document, periodically.
I'm having trouble finding where you guys are.
Okay.
I've just shared it up. You want to start on this one, Katie?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Do you see
Yeah.
there's a folder capital budget meetings, and it has a folder for each of the meeting dates in it.
Yeah,
If you go into the 210 one, there's a subfolder in there, financial management policies.
I'm not getting, I don't see 210. I don't know where I'm looking, and completely in the wrong place, but I'm going to capital budget.
Yep, going to annual record, going
Yeah.
to CB FY26 requests,
Yeah.
and then there's a folder called capital budget meetings.
Oh, okay, I see it now. Jeez, it was
Okay.
huge staring at me and I kept missing it.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so this was the general policy that was developed and has been updated since then. It doesn't really touch on capital a lot. It talks more about sort of general budget policy that and how the town is going to manage its finances. But I did sort of highlight a couple areas where it does talk about capital projects, and these were sort of just, again, coming out of the fiscal crisis, there was a lot of concern about funding operating costs out of either free cash flow or out of stabilization funds. And so a lot of the wording that was put in originally and then has been updated sort of makes that a no-no in terms as a policy perspective. The one thing that it does require is that we have a 5-year capital improvement program, which we have had in the past a more buttoned up version of the 10-year plan. I think right now we're some departments are quite buttoned up and some need to be tightened up a little bit. As an example, in our current 10-year plan, I think every department has something in there except for schools, which just has 1 year essentially. And facilities has pieces of their plan, but not the whole plan. So I think when I look at this, one of the observations that I made is that if we're going to be serious about our financial management, perhaps going back and sort of tightening it up for the 5-year capital improvement program would be a good first step.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the select board talked about last week was just doing a quick policy review. And so I know that there's going to be a subcommittee that is going to talk about this particular policy and if there's any updates, and then the second one, which we'll bring up in a second. But this was, again, the higher level of the two, and it only talked about capital in a couple specific places.
Yeah, again, yeah, the takeaways here being just, you know, since we all have this in our head, kind of the highlighted things that Katie highlighted, which is, you know, the 5-year, which we've been working on, but then, you know, the concept, again, a lot of this history here is that years ago, the town, you know, was not in good financial situation. Now, 15 years ago, whatever, and we've been we've been really good about maintaining a AAA bond rating and getting awards for good, you know, fiscal management. But so these policies here are all kind of, I don't know why this is here, are all kind of born out of that experience to try to keep us in a good place. So, you know, again, postponing stuff, you know, rolling over debt, you know, that kind of thing. So we, you know, we keep ourselves in a good, healthy position.
Yeah. The postponing expenditures is the one that, you know, jumps off the page to me as a capital budget member. Like we just had this conversation, like, do we need to do the backhoe this year? Can we? And again, like in many cases, they're not necessarily,
Well,
you're not getting too much trouble, but you start accumulating that year after year, you land out with an issue.
well, but I mean, it's not just the fixed pie discussion, it's the size of the pie discussion, right? I mean, as capital funding is, you know, negatively, you know, attended to, you know, the postponing expenditures is going to continue to get worse, right? That's, you know, so it's not just us choosing A or B, it's the town putting enough money towards capital improvements.
Mhm.
And, you know, and that's what that line to me says is, you know, again, if we're underfunding capital improvements, we're postponing expenditures. We're not saving money. And that's an important, I think, message from this committee is, you know, again, the idea that capital, you know, capital improvement, capital investments are an easy thing to push off because the cost isn't right in your face. You don't need to fire somebody, right? It's easier to say, oh, we'll buy a, you know, a backhoe next year, you know, but those costs don't go away. And that's kind of where you get into trouble. So
And they do stack up
Mm.
eventually.
Yeah.
You have an
Yeah.
ambulance stacking on top of a fire engine, stacking on top of a ladder truck.
yeah, on top of a school roof, on top of an AC system, and
Yeah.
on top of a town hall, right? I
Yep.
mean, we're living
Exactly.
this experience, and I think you know, every time we attempt to dig ourselves out, it seems like we're very eager to kind of start digging again. So you know, it's just, and you know, the tension is healthy, but you know, we need to, you know, ensure as this committee goes that we also, you know, ensure the town has at least enough attention on this type of expenditures. So.
Yep.
All right, I'll share the next one too here. Reserve and
On
debt.
reserve debt policies. And again, I went through this and just highlighted in yellow where, you know, a lot of it isn't specific to capital, but some of it does tie directly to us. And the second page in terms of the debt stabilization is where it really kicks in. Hold on one second, Corey. Yes.
Yeah, this is the advisory, but yeah, this section is really the
Yeah, exactly. Where
Jesus, this freaking thing. I don't know what does anyone know what feature this is that keeps having a yellow box pop up? I don't know what it
I
is.
don't
The
know what.
comment box, I think.
No idea. Okay, anyway.
Nice job. This was just, again, just a reminder to me that the way the policy is currently written is that both the general stabilization and the capital stabilization are tied together in one financial metric. So when they measure against that financial goal of a stabilization fund balance, 15% of the tax levy, it's both a combination of the
Correct.
general stabilization and capital stabilization. And the only reason that I think it's just worth us noting is it's part of the reason that we can't dip down, you know, to zero because we negatively impact year to year, we negatively impact the financial goal of the town to have a 15% balance because we're tied to the numerator in this case. We're part of the numerator to get to 15%.
Correct. Yeah, our $1 million that we roll over is, is both, functional in how we pay bills, but also, policy based. So.
Yeah. And I think a piece of it is interesting. And again, I don't know, just thinking back to the history, when we started these conversations back in 2016, the town didn't have much of a balance in the general stabilization. And so it was important to have capital tied into that numerator because we basically had nothing. We were sort of building from zero. And so again, I'm not advocating one way or another, but it is interesting that our general stabilization figure is now healthy, and we're having to top it off at $30,000 a year versus when we first started it, we were adding in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, could we uncouple it in a policy change? Maybe, I don't know. It's not a bad thing to have us tied, but it does handcuff us to dipping below a certain level.
Yeah, and then finally, you've got the free cash kind of section here, which is a discussion we've been having for a while, and this is mainly for Chris. So obviously the concept of free cash is pretty well defined here. The town has a policy to have to always have a free cash of 3 to 4%. DOR says 3 to 5. It popped up in town meeting or resident, which we all know by name and very well. There's an opinion that
equals a tax return.
Yeah. Well, there's the free cash thing is often tossed around as overtaxation, but this is a financial policy because we're not allowed to run a deficit. So it's not that it's not an overtaxation, it's an under budgeting. So we budget 3 to 4% below what we expect to collect in taxes, and then at the end of the year, hopefully we collect as much as we expected or more, and then we have a free cash amount. The big deal every year, especially this cycle, is how the free cash funds are being dispersed. So, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong. FY24 was 2.1 million.
So it sounds right. I think it was higher. We were the FY24 was 1.8. I think the
1.8.
previous year was
It
higher.
was 2.1. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the 1.8 million, typically that gets carved up. You've got this kind of priority list down here. Extraordinary, unforeseen, extraordinary emergency events like the DPW or the transfer station lighting on fire, that would probably qualify. And then typically the capital stabilization fund gets kind of a top off for specific projects. It's town hall or it's, some field thing where free cash will be used towards a capital improvement. And then every once in a while you do see a one-time expense, whether, we've bought in the past curriculum for the schools or, random things throughout the years that kind of didn't fit into a bucket.
Yeah.
So,
And I think the unforeseen and extraordinary emergency, we've seen an emergency this year with RTF. We have extraordinary and unforeseen in the school deficit. And we also have extraordinary happening with healthcare expenses. Maya, our healthcare provider, came in this year with a significantly higher estimate of what our health insurance costs are going to be, to the tune of like $1.2 million more than last year. And so just so we're aware, there are a number of different calls against free cash flow. We had $1.8 million at the end of fiscal 24. We appropriated roughly $600,000 at annual town meeting, leaving an undesignated fund balance of 1.3 million, but that 1.3 million now is having to cover the school's deficit, which they're trying to get down to 700,000 or 800,000. And now we have healthcare expenses coming in significantly higher. And we have our normal appropriations that we want to make out to other stabilization funds like OPEB and capital. So there's just a lot of calls on free cash flow at this particular moment.
Yeah.
So,
And the final thing, which, you know, we're going to be tossing around in this committee, especially with the current discussions on town hall, it seems like we could anticipate the idea of taking on some debt against the capital stabilization fund. So in that vein, having the committee kind of be aware of the debt policy back in 2016. So again, this, you know, these are policies that were made by us and can be changed if we see fit, but this is as they currently stand. Ideas that, you know, we're bonding items with, you know, we're going to bond items that are over $25,000, have more than 5 years. All that makes sense. It all seems very reasonable. And our these debt amounts, we're nowhere close to any of these numbers. So we're really not in the realm of kind of discussing those when it comes to what we're going to deal with.
I think there was one more section where it just.
Correct. Yeah. So this idea of ensuring we explore we prioritize using cash over taking on debt. Again, fairly straightforward, you know, policy when it comes to your North Star.
Yeah, and I think this was just it. And again, this is where, you know, Ralph, Francine, Susan, you guys have more experience in terms of like what historically has capital chosen to bond. Obviously, anything over $25,000 in 5 years is eligible, but
It's
on the
always been
flip
much
side of that, there's
much larger projects than that.
yeah.
Right.
So,
And I think that is, oh, here we go.
yeah.
Yeah, that's just procedural. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So I think we're good.
Yeah. So the select board was going to review probably, again, timeline TBD, was going to review both the first document we looked at, sort of the financial management policies plus the reserve and debt at some point. But just so we're aware that is going on.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's been in my mind, and I've had conversation with people throughout town on this, is ensuring that the transfer to the capital stabilization fund, apropos of what I said earlier, is increased every year. The fact that basically the history here, and everyone knows, Susan and Francine, you've been fighting this fight for, you know, 8 years now, whatever it's been. So the fact that the dollar figure that goes into capital every year is again, as it's budgeted, flat, which means it's effectively negatively funded with, you know, inflation, and we see the cost of things in our budget go up, and our requests go up drastically, especially since COVID, and there's been no budgeted in adjustment. As I said earlier, we get topped off with free cash, but that also means in a year like this where we don't have that free cash top off, the squeeze is real. And one thing about the stabilization funds, which were great, is it kind of got us to where we probably should have been when it came to capital spending. But we're going to keep falling behind unless there's a clear understanding that there needs to at least be an increase of capital funding that is, you know, in line with how the rest of the town department's budgets grow, right? Everyone grows 2.5%. And if capital expenditures don't grow at the same time, then you're just borrowing against the future. So that's just something which I think our committee, it's our job to kind of watch this. It's our job to advocate for it. Obviously, everyone advocates for other things as well, and that's just fine. But the idea that if we're looking at these policies, having a policy to ensure that there's enough money going to capital improvement projects, it should be on that list of things to enshrine in a policy.
You know, and the select board did flash up a projection for FY26 for capital transfers to capital stabilization at their last meeting. It was really a very preliminary number, but the number that was thrown up was actually 1996060, which is the number that was funded in FY24. So it was actually below the 2 million whatever 060 that was funded last year. I do think that there's a hope that as they sort of work through the budget and figure out exactly what the Maya number looks like, and they figure out what the school deficit looks like, that that'll come up to a level funded number.
It just,
From year to year, so it may come to 2096060 again, but when the ambulance goes from 224,000 to 502,000, it's inflation and eats into that.
and we just have to be aware of it when it comes to, we've got that 10-year kind of document that we're working on now pretty actively. That has a 2.5% adder, because that was kind of the understanding we had last fiscal cycle that would be the expectation. And that's what we got for FY25 via a kind of a free cash backdoor. But again, as we project out, if we say, okay, we can't afford it this year, we can afford it next year, or the year after that, those numbers, you know, again, if you do 2.5% over 2 or 3 years, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it will impact how we discuss the future, either in knowing to expect this or to not expect it. And you know, that's important for us to get a handle on.
Right, but what we're talking about is being underfunded puts us in a precarious, you know, continuously precarious position, because then you say, all right, well, maybe we need to do more debt to cover these demands, but then that makes our debt service grow dramatically.
And our
So,
buying power goes down. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's and you know, you never want to be alarmist, but there's, you know, it's just, you know, the what is it, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? You just, and you know, this is why I think this committee's always been very hesitant on taking on debt, because there's a very fine line between everything's hunky-dory and everything's not. And I think often you realize things are not okay after it's too late. So just to put it, you know, we wanted to have that conversation with everybody, because we want to be sure that we are, as a committee, advocating for, again, capital expenditures growing the way that they need to be to keep us healthy.
Yeah. And this year, you know, the 2.5% increase from the 2096060 that was funded last year at annual town meeting, it equates to $50,000. But like, as you add that up year over year, it obviously accumulates. One of the things that has sort of quote unquote helped us this year, if we do remain flat at that, you know, $2.1 million in funding, is that we did have more money coming in from repurposed articles. And Ralph has pointed this out before, and others have pointed this out, that the run rate on repurposed articles is like $75,000 to $100,000 that we can expect. This year obviously was a bigger number because of the turnbacks from an IT project and the turnbacks from the town hall roof. So we were able to quote unquote make up some of the differences, because the repurposed articles are coming in at 384,000. So that helps us a little bit this year. But it's not something that we're going to be able to replicate year after year, for sure. So you know, when I sort of look at the numbers still, I'm still sort of seeing the same ability to fund, you know, 2.1, maybe max 2.3 in terms of capital projects. But that's, again, that's a discussion for the committee as to how close we want to drop our ending balance down to $1 million.
Yep, stuff we'll have to, so yeah, have this in everyone's head, because after we hear town hall, then we'll kind of shift our gears into how we fit everything into the bucket, because obviously the bucket is much smaller than what the stuff we have is. So keep all this fresh, and as we get into the the back and forth, we'll need to understand it.
Yeah, and this is why the 5 or 10 year plan is so important to us.
Yeah.
Is making that decision. We can't go into the next year having made the wrong decision.
Exactly.
You draw down, you just don't have the ability to catch back up when you have, $1 million expense coming with a fire truck, again, which you're likely to bond, but still it's a big expense relative to the overall capital budget.
Right.
Yeah. So. Um,
Exciting conversation.
Definitely.
What's the next thing? Do we have anything else?
Next thing's minutes.
I didn't see any minutes
I
from
don't think
Michelle.
that Michelle provided any minutes
Yeah.
for.
I think when I went back, it looked like you had said this, Susan, that we're missing the 10:28 minutes, and that's sort of a critical. Well, that's where the two missing votes were that we were wondering about. So we need the 2:28 set. I think we could vote the 11:4 set if we wanted to, but we might as well hold and vote them all together. And then obviously we need to get the next batch of minutes.
So I'm not all that familiar with Zoom because I don't use it generally for anything other than this, but I do know in Microsoft Teams you can have it do a synopsis of your meeting, and it's amazing what it comes up with. It uses AI.
Yeah.
I wonder if Zoom does that. It'd be a really easy way to get our minutes.
Yeah, there's definitely plugins we can do. I'm not sure if we subscribe to them. So
I literally wrote a cover letter this weekend where I copied in the job description bits of like a resume and something else, and it like wrote a perfect cover letter. I wish we could do the same for like
well, then do we
meeting.
even have to have the meeting? Could we just have AI do the minutes?
But I'm telling you, like, it was like, my sister kept on telling me, she's like, write that cover letter in AI. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is better. I could have spent an hour and not written this, so.
Well, the ironic thing, it's like what they do is they, all these things get shoved into machines anyway. So AI is both writing it and summarizing it. So I'm like, can we just skip the entire process then? Like, can we just not write things anymore? Because if we're just gonna have computers generate and then ungenerate, like, what are we doing? So
Exactly. All right, so I guess when Michelle is feeling better, can we shake the tree again?
yeah, I'll poke.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, so I think we probably want to look at the month of March since we're
Yeah.
17th is President's Day. We got the 24th for Town Hall. So how are people looking in March?
Yeah, so and just for the 24th, I don't know if we mentioned it already or if everyone's on the email, but it looks like we're going to have an in-person meeting for the 24th.
I did not see that email, so
Oh, my apologies.
yeah.
Yep. So yeah, so in person on 24th, because town hall, obviously there's a lot of back and forth and such like that. And that committee would prefer to be in person to kind of walk us through a lot of the things. And
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
I'll be sure I ping Ralph on it.
I think I could do every Monday in March. I'd prefer not to do the week of the 17th, but I'm pretty good.
Okay, how's everybody else?
I am as well.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I mean, let's
Do you want
target
the 3rd, 10th, and 24th then?
let's pencil in the 3rd and the 10th and then see where we are. We can address the 17th, 24th on February 24th.
On the schools, Francine, thank you for your follow-up questions. If anybody else has follow-up questions, if they could send them to me, I'd like to get them back to Sarah. I had a quick conversation with her today, and she is working on the follow-up on roads and sidewalks. She's working on the athletic van follow-up, but if people have other questions or specific questions on those two topics, send them along. She is available she will pass along the follow-up as it becomes available. And she's happy to come back to the committee and clarify in person. The only date that she cannot do is the 10th because she's got contract negotiations. So depending on how things roll in March, she's available any day except for that.
Yeah, I'm good in March. All those dates.
And
How do you guys typically roll, like, once we hear from town hall? And assuming nothing else falls out of the the funding tree, the funding request tree, which sometimes happens. How do you guys run the next phase of the process, just out of curiosity?
well, as we said, we'd have to get through town hall and the enterprise funds, and then
Yep,
and anybody who has to come back for further information, like you're saying with schools, we would go through that. But then after all that information is in, we literally just start going through the list and
okay,
discussing everything in detail. Most of the time, we do have prioritization from the individual, requesting groups.
yep,
Yeah, and then we'll do follow-ups if we need to call somebody back on some sort of thing. Yep.
I think last year, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it took us like 2 or 3 sessions of going through them line by line.
Yeah, we weren't quite as disciplined about this process that we had now though. Where
Mhm.
we're really I think we're doing a great job of being in listening phase.
Yeah.
I think last cycle we were kind of doing 2 things at once, or at least it felt that way. So yeah, I mean we heard a lot of stuff, but we did some approvals beforehand, and then we did some other stuff kind of in real time, and then we did a final kind of vote-a-rama, but we'd already largely gone through a lot of that kind of deliberation. So this will be a little bit more. We've heard everything. Now we gotta get our number. Now we gotta deliberate. We gotta figure out what other questions get answered. So I think we can
Right.
do it in 2 meetings, right? You just,
Yeah,
we get
that's
through.
how it
Yeah.
okay,
works.
And then there's usually
Things always do fall off.
yeah, and there's the things that fall off, and there's always something random that pops up that we have to scramble
Mhm.
beforehand. So
well, I guess the thing that I see that, I don't know who advises or whether we advise ourselves on is the bonding question, like, if we do choose to bond something, like, how do we get let's, just as an example, let's say to make space in the budget, we choose to bond the ambulance, at 502,000. Who does the calculation to say a bonded ambulance is gonna go from $502,000 cash to, I don't know, $40,000 a year in interest? Like, how do we get to that figure?
that's a good question for Michelle. Yeah.
Okay,
Because we don't have a finance director. I mean, we have treasurer and accountant, so I think the math we can get done, but who should present it to us is a different question of structure and hierarchy, I think.
Mhm.
okay,
But I think if we had a clear ask from Michelle, listen, we want to, see the debt service payments and totals on the ambulance, for instance, we were clear about that. She could come back and get those done for us.
okay. And that'll be
Well,
okay.
maybe as part of the 24th meeting, we could take a few minutes amongst ourselves deciding which ones we might propose, so we could have that information in front of us when we start to go through the decision making.
That-
Let's punt that till March. I want us to be clear for town hall. And then, I mean, it's really not too big. I mean, considering we have only a few things that are really so far above that $25,000 threshold as individual asks that we'd even consider it. It's pretty easy for us to just make a formula that we could plug into it, anything real time, I'm guessing.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, like technically some of the RTF stuff could fall into that, but to Katie's point, the insurance could reduce that.
Yeah. Well, but or the dump trucks, right? I mean, those were
Dump trucks.
yeah,
those
the
are big
the
items.
550, yeah, we bonded in 21. So there's certainly, we could just look at the fleet costs and seeing what bonding is, and then decide from there.
yeah, okay.
I mean, once we have the bond rate, it's pretty easy to just you can just replug in numbers and go back and forth. So,
Okay,
We'll take it up in March then.
okay. That sounds good. Yeah, and in terms of like, I haven't even looked at the broader timetable, but town meeting is on the 12th of May. That means the warrant closes beginning of April, right?
correct.
Means that we have to have our voting done
End of March.
end of March, but probably not the 31st, like
No, probably the 24th, right? We
by the
should target.
24th, we have to have our votes done, and if we get them done early, good for us.
Well, yeah, because we should get them done, and then we should get them done on the Monday before we go on Tuesday to have a joint meeting with the select board, right? So we need to give them, a week, would be nice too, would be better, if we were 2 weeks ahead of their close date, so that we can do a joint meeting and go through our capital list and, just, go through all the procedures we need to go through. Because it's not, once we have our votes, we still have to, have the select board go through them, as well. We present them to the select board, and the select board does their voting and yada, yada, yada.
And does select board, because historically, select board doesn't vote on anything until advisory votes on it. You guys don't present to advisory, you just present to select board.
No, we also need to join with advisory too.
All right.
Yep.
Well, that sounds like we should target having our votes done by the 17th if possible. 24th wouldn't kill us.
Yeah, and then because then advisory is usually Wednesday, so we'd have to do a Monday and then a Wednesday and then a Tuesday, right? If we want to do these in order. So
Yeah. Yeah, you have to do your advisory on a Wednesday and your select board the following Tuesday. So
Following
you need 2 weeks to get through the vote and the follow-on joint meetings. Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And from time to time, if things get really, really squished, select
Okay.
board will do like a special Thursday, but we don't want to put them in that position if we don't need to. So
Okay. All right. So it sounds like the 3rd might be like sort of the wrap up and like try and get everything wrapped up so that we can begin to deliberate the week of the 10th and the 17th and be voting along the way. Okay.
yeah,
Thank
the 3rd is where we need to have our number. We need to have everything in front of us. We kind of have to close the door on any kind of changes, and then start going through it. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, because it's been a while since I've had to manage the backing up from the warrant printing deadline to the meetings to the to the votes. And it's
no
like
kidding,
all of a sudden a month is like chewed up. So,
right?
okay.
All right then.
All right, I will make a motion to adjourn then.
I will second.
Okay. Roll call vote? Or just vote?
Yep,
No.
just vote aye.
Corey Evans,
Katie.
aye.
Hi, Chris Peisch.
Great, Chris. Well, I guess we'll see you in person, Chris, on the 24th. So stay tuned. You don't have to look for a Zoom link. This is a big meeting for you.
It'll be great.
Exactly. No, between now and then, I mean, honestly, if you have trouble tracking down Dan Kelly to help with your refreshing your town email, like just Michelle's there. That's part of like her function too, to help you get that unfrozen.
I'm trying to limit my inconvenience factor here to various committee members.
Well, you're the only one, Chris. The rest of us just.
It's got to be one pain in the neck in the crowd.
Well, no. I think you're underestimating how much of a pain in the neck the rest of us are. So.
Fair.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great President's Week for those of you that are able to celebrate that. And I will see everybody in person on the 24th.
All right, have a good night.
Katie,
Yeah.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.